Hello guys and welcome to Odds on Serie A, round 28, and we have Daniele Fisichella after the international break. Hello Danny.
All good? Well, good, all good. It's been a decent international break. 3 points for Italy, defeat against England. Second half played a little bit better. Win against Malta, 2 goals for the new man Retegui, and now the last 11 games in Serie A, and of course, quarterfinals of Champions League, of Europa League. The best is yet to come.
Exactly. We have Napoli Milan, for instance, this Sunday, the same game we are going to see on the quarterfinals in the Champions League. So remember to analyze with us, leave your comments, tell us if you agree or disagree with Danny's tips, and of course, press the like and subscribe. Now, let's enjoy Serie A. Danny coming back on Saturday. Remember that these teams are going to play on Saturday because we have Coppa Italia semifinals the following week. Cremonese, Atalanta is our first game, and surprisingly, Cremonese, they play Fiorentina. In Coppa Italia, hopeless in Serie A, so I guess their focus is on that game against Fiorentina. In Coppa Italia, the opposite for Atalanta. They have to focus in the Serie A because they can still qualify for Europe, and they have one top scorer, Danny Højlund. He scored against Empoli, and also we saw him scoring in the international break. We should trust Atalanta here.
We should, despite they had a recent slip in form. Of course, they beat Empoli before the break. Højlund, by the way, 5 goals with Denmark in 2 games. He was the main man, despite they've been defeated by Kazakhstan away. What a shocker. Atalanta have got a great chance here to finish within the top 6, let's say, because that was the objective at the beginning of the season. But why not pushing for the top 4? Everything depends whether the points deducted to Juventus will remain as 15. But they really need to keep going now without international competition, without cup competition domestically. They have a good chance. Only 1 clean sheet in the last 5 for Atalanta. The problem is they sometimes obviously let themselves exposed, whereas Cremonese, 2 defeats in the last 5 games, so it's not too bad, really. And of course, the very important Coppa Italia semi-final coming up midweek. They are going down, but they're going down with a fight. They score in 4 out of the last 5 games. Drew 1-1 against Monza, against another super performance by their keeper Carnesecchi. It is a team that still only won 1 game at home against Roma. I think Atalanta should be winning this one, really. If they don't win this one, they got no hope of finishing in the top 4. I'm going to go for an Atalanta win and a high-scoring game, but, just keep it cautious. Over 1.5 goals. Combining Atalanta win and over 1.5 goals, that pays 2.19.
Atalanta, indeed, right now they are 6th in the standings, 3 points away from Milan in the 4th spot. And we have a very interesting game, Inter Milan, Fiorentina, with a bad moment for Inter. Yes. Of course, they are in the Champions League quarterfinals, but they are not getting the results they hope to get. The last game was the defeat, remember, against Juve in the Derby d'Italia. Only 1 victory in the last 5 games in all competitions. The good news for Inter, Danny, I guess, is that we saw Lukaku scoring goals for Belgium in the international break.
Yes, that's probably the best news from this international break. 3 goals against Sweden, 1 against Germany. If anything, his confidence has been restored. Let's see what his physical condition is. He's been really missing for Inter this season. Only 5 goals or here. If they hope to finish the season on a high, they need the best Lukaku for sure, alongside other players, probably the likes of Marcelo Brozovic, on top of everyone, to really perform better than what they've done so far. This is like a sliding door moment for Inter. Inter are still in the semi-final Coppa Italia, quarterfinals of the Champions League. They need to hold on to the 3rd or 2nd spot in Serie A. Things can go well or horribly wrong for them, and from that it will depend the future of many players next season and the manager, although some people think the management has already decided that Inzaghi is at the end of the road. The last defeat against Juventus was extremely polemic for that alleged handball, first by Rabiot and then by Vlahovic. But despite that, I think the goal should not have stood. But despite that, Inter deserve to lose. Lost 3 of the last 4, only scored 3 goals in the last 4 games, Inter. And that's really worrying. They are without a few players for this one, without Skriniar, without Gosens, maybe Di Marco, still without Bastoni. There are a lot of important games coming up in April. They got 9 games, including those 2 semi-finals and quarterfinals, as I mentioned before. Is this a chance now for Inzaghi maybe to try players who haven't played much so far, like Aslani, Bellanova, the young players, and maybe start injecting a little bit more of fresh blood here? The problem for Inter is that they're going to face one of the most informed teams in Serie A, 5 consecutive wins for Fiorentina. They've already found the form and the best formation. The midfield is working much better at the moment. And, up front, the likes of Cabral, Jovic, they are scoring goals. Last year, they finished 1-1. Inter were in crisis and drew against Fiorentina. And those 2 points were costly at the end of the season. 4 out of the last 5 games between these 2 teams have been both to score. If you remember, back in November, it was that amazing 4-3 for Inter with a last-minute goal from Mkhitaryan. A contrast Inter really too much here. You might want to even go for an Asian handicap plus 0.75 for Fiorentina, which pays decently. I'm going to go for both to score here, 188.
Fiorentina, they are in the best moment of the season, 8 consecutive victories in all competitions, alive in the Conference League and in Coppa Italia. So be careful with Inter. They are not anymore in the second spot in the standings. And also we have Juve Verona, because we are going to see another Inter Juve in Coppa Italia, with Juve getting points and being close actually now to the European spots in Serie A. Dani also alive in the knockout stages. They are going to face Sporting Lisbon in the Europa League, and they face Verona, as you predicted. Verona lost against Sampdoria, 5 points away from salvation. Still some hope, but difficult to believe. Juve to win and something else perhaps, no?
Juve to win and under 3.5 goals. That's my pick. 192. So a 2-0 win for Juve, 2-1 win for Juventus, 3-0 or 1-0. It gives you a good return. 192, because Juventus against stragglers this season have been really good, really consistent, always professional. Most of the time, beat them 2-0. Maybe that 4-2 win against Sampdoria was a little bit of a fluke. Juventus have won 6 of the last 7 Serie A games. The only defeat came in Roma against Mourinho, 1-0, and they were a little bit unlucky there. The last 3 home games have been wins. And, they are -7th from the 4th place, considering the -15-point deduction. So at home, for example, they've been really good. Only got 1 point less than Napoli. Some people criticize the style of football they play, but I feel now they're getting back all the best players. They're doing much better. At San Siro, without creating too many chances, they were the worthy winners, really, helped by a great display by Fagioli. They're going to have a few players missing here, Juventus. So that's why I'm going to go for an under 3.5 goals. They're going to be without Rabiot, potentially Chiesa. Kostic is in doubt. Milik and Pogba still out. The good news is that Vlahovic scored 3 goals with Serbia in the qualifiers. They desperately need his goals. He seems to be back to his best. Verona winless in 5. The last win was on the 13th of February. They've been affected by injuries. They strengthened the team in January, but now the best players are out, especially Ngonge. Hien maybe might be back. Henry, Juric, the tall striker, who seemed to be the perfect target man for them, he might be out. So they're really struggling there. These 2 teams don't score many goals. Only 37%, so that's 10 out of 27 matches of both Juventus and Verona have been over 2.5 goals. Juventus have been the masters of the clean sheet and time margins. Verona are stragglers and don't score many goals. So that's why I go for an under 3.5 goals, by this case with a Juventus win, which pays 192.
All right, and on Sunday, the first game we have is Bologna Udinese. Nothing to play for, I think, for these teams in this season. Comfortable in the middle of the table, but in good moment, I would say. Both teams, Bologna, 2 consecutive draws, only 1 defeat in 5. They are strong at the Dallara, only 3 defeats this season. Udinese, Dani, back in the good track, beating Milan, for instance, easily in the last game.
And they looked in form, Udinese, in the last game against Milan. And I didn't mention, I think these teams at the moment are quite dangerous to play against because they got nothing to play for. Unlikely they will finish in the top 7, but they got young managers with good ideas, a good system of play, young players, and they could finish the season really strongly. Udinese are unbeaten in 4. They are -3 from Juventus in the 7th place. I don't think they're gonna catch it, but they kept 3 clean sheet away in the last 5 against Milan. Yes, they look really, really good, especially helped by Lazar Samardzic playing in the midfield in the mezzala role. I think you're gonna hear about this player very soon, much more, and he might be playing for one of the top teams in Europe in a couple of years. But for this one, Udinese, they're without some key players: Becao, Perez, Wallace, Bijol, the defender, he might be doubt, so they travel with some absenteeism. We know the squad is not as deep. Bologna, yes, as you mentioned, at home they're solid, 7th in the home table, no wins in the last 3, but is a side that I think he has overperformed recently, considering that they've been playing for a long time without Arnautovic. Now these 2 teams are in the top 3 in Serie A for both to score, so normally score, they concede, they rarely win 2-0, so I'm gonna go for a both to score here, 194 for the game at the Dallara.
Similar, I think Bologna and Udinese, nothing to play for, but entertaining, like Sassuolo, for instance, that we will talk in a bit. But before, we have Spezia Salernitana, and this game is important, of course, because they are both safe. But looking back to the relegation spots, Spezia 7 points away, Salernitana 8 points away, and especially Dani, Salernitana getting points. They drew the last game against Bologna, 4 undefeated games. They are in a good moment, actually, Salernitana. For Spezia, for instance, they beat Inter in the last home game.
And the calendar gives them a very big advantage because they play the day after Verona, so they already know the Verona result in Turin, and because, of course, they are respectively +5 points, Spezia on Verona, and +8 points on Verona, whatever happens in Turin will be massive for the development of this game. If Verona loses in Turin, both they could be happy and content perhaps with a draw. Spezia only lost 1 of the last 4, only won 1 of the last 4, and they only scored 2 goals against Inter in the last 5 games. And the bad news for them is that Zola is suspended. With the arrival of Semplici, they are playing more attacking football, more expansive, and they would hope to get the result against fellow stragglers, because so far this season, Spezia home, they've been really consistent. They have scored goals. Salernitana, on the other side, also changed the manager. They got Paulo Sousa. They look more balanced. 1 win and 3 draws since the Portuguese is in charge. 2 clean sheets. If they win here and Verona doesn't pick up any points, they are saved because they got +11. So it is a very, very good chance for Salernitana to leave the rest of the season, without too many worries and start planning. And obviously, in that case, Paulo Sousa will continue to be the manager. They only won 2 away games so far this season, but I think here they might have the upper hand. And I like the Asian handicap +0.25 for Salernitana, which pays 195. If they win, you win. If they draw, you win half a stake. And considering how good it pays, I think it's worth going.
Yeah, very underdog, actually, Salernitana in this game, 3.4 to win, Spezia 2.3, and Dani doesn't see Spezia this favorite. We have then Monza, Lazio. Monza absolutely safe, of course. In the last 2 games, they were able to draw against teams in the relegation zone like Cremonese and Verona. But now, Dani, we have Lazio second in the standings after the victory in the Derby della Capitale, and their only focus right now is Serie A because they are out of Europe.
And this is going to help. We saw them last season. As soon as they crashed out of the Europa League, they improved, they played better. Sarri loves having more time to train the players, more time to perfect the tactics. So for them, going out of the Conference League in such a tight race for the 4th spot is a blessing in disguise, really. Yes, never mind not winning the cup competition, but if they finish 4th this season, it is a great, great achievement. Great celebration in Roma. The Lazio side, of course, after the derby, it looks like they won a Champions League final. It was not a very spectacular derby, very nervous. In the end, Lazio won it. Also, Roma were down to 10 men. but they are second in the league, which is a great result if you look at it. Second best defense, 5 consecutive clean sheet in Serie A, 16 in total. So it is a team built on defensive solidity, and they keep the ball really well, defend with the ball. Between September and October, they had 6 clean sheet in Serie A. So they are more than capable to do this run again. 5 games unbeaten. The good news is that Immobile is back. He's not injured. He could start. Zaccagni didn't get called up with the national team, so he had a little bit of rest, and these two are the top scorers for Lazio. Monza on the other side, disappointing draw against Cremonese. I thought they should have beat them. They are unbeaten in 3 games, only 1 clean sheet in the last 6, though, and they only lost 1 of the last 8 games at home against Milan, and they were slightly unlucky in that case, Monza. Missing a few players for this one, Izzo, Pessina, Rovella. I think the Lazio is the better side, has got much more to play for, should be winner here, but I'm going to be cautious and I'm going to go for a nation handicap minus 0.25 for Lazio, which pays 182, which means if they win, you win. If they draw, you only lose half your stake. If Monza wins, you lose the full stake.
All right, you go for Lazio, and the opposite thing I think we can say about the other team in the capital,
Yes.
Roma. Sampdoria, 3 defeats in the last 4 games in Serie A for Roma, against Lazio in the derby, always painful, against Sassuolo at home, completely focused in the Europa League. They have a real chance to get to the final. But, Danny, you mentioned in our previous video that the loser of the derby won't play Champions League the next season. Still with hopes, I guess, especially because now they have 3 games that I think they should win. The first one against Sampdoria.
Yes, so they have a good fixtures, really. Roma,
Torino and Udinese.
And then, yes, these are not bad things. Of course, they are sandwiched between the Europa League. And I think Roma against Lazio, they look too nervous. Again, I think everything that's gone on with Mourinho and his suspension has affected the players. You know, the way Bagnets picked up 2 yellow cards in the space of 30 minutes, it's criminal. And then Roma, yes, they were pegged back, forced to defense, didn't have the ammunition to hurt Lazio or to regain possession quickly once they lost it. They're without the entire defense here. They're without Mancini, Ibañez, Kubulla, so only Smalling is available. Without Cristante, these are all suspended. Despite having the second best home defense, Roma 9 goals conceded. They lost 3 out of the last 4 games, and I think they paid the price for playing in Europe. Those games against Salzburg and Real Sociedad prove a little bit too much for a squad that I think is a little bit short in some areas. The good news is that Wijnaldum is playing more and more minutes. He also played with the Netherlands. I think he was one of the least worst players in that defeat against France. Look, the defeat 3-4 at home against Sassuolo, I think, was a fluke. 5 wins to 0 before that for Roma. So I think they should revert to that solid professional performance. So if it's a win for Roma, I would imagine a win to 0 or a win by a small margin. Sampdoria on the other side finally won the game. They are -9 on Spezia. They play after Spezia. So depending on the result of Spezia, this is obviously he has got a lot on it. If Spezia wins, Sampdoria are going to be desperate and they will have to attack and go for it. They got the 3rd worst defense in Serie A, Sampdoria, scoring 4 out of the last 7. The good news is that some of the players are in form, or they're finding a little bit of form. Sabiri scored against Brazil. Morocco beat Brazil thanks to the Sampdoria man. Gabbiadini scored a couple recently. The last time they went to Roma, they only lost 1-0 at the Olimpico at the end of February. And, it was a very close game against Lazio, but also they traveled to Roma with a lot of injuries, including the goalkeeper Audero. Nuitink, the defender who they bought in January and has been a good addition, is suspended. If they lose this one, Sampdoria, I don't think they're going to get trashed. Let's put it that way, because Roma has not been that kind of team this season. So I'm going to go for a nation handicap plus 125 for Sampdoria, which pays 186. That means if they lose by 1 goal, you are still winning half your stake. If they draw, you win. If they win, you win. So for you to lose the stake, they need to lose by 2 goals or more, because it's the nation handicap plus 125.
Well done. Imagine if Roma is not this kind of team, thrashing teams at home. They've only scored 17 goals in 13 games played
Very low.
at the Olympico. Very low. They
Well,
won
they've
some
been the
games
masters.
1-0.
I think last time we did a video in Europa League, I counted in the last year and a half how many times they won 1-0 and 2-0. I think it was around 13, 14 times. So they've been really good in tight margins. Yeah, but they're nowhere near the scoring tally that everyone expects them to be, despite the addition of Dybala. So with Roma, you could wonder, they might need something else in the summer, but yeah, for this season, I think it's very unlikely you're gonna see like 3 or 4-0 scores.
Well, and the last game we have on Sunday is Napoli-Milan. We are going to see this game in the Champions League quarterfinals.
Again.
What a game. We will talk about it with Álvaro in a couple of weeks, but it's very difficult actually to trust Milan. Perhaps if you are Milanista, Rossonero, you can check the head-to-head and see that the last 5 times these teams met, the away team won. Actually, yes. Napoli won in San Siro this season, but Milan won last season in the Maradona. Apart from that, Danny, very difficult to be honest. And Milan now, they are risking to get out of the Champions League spots, by the way, if they lose at the Maradona.
There are, and the difference, the golfing class between the current champions and the future champions of Italy, it's starking. But you're right, the last 6 encounters between Milan and Napoli have been very tight. They've been really, really tight. Milan won here in March, Napoli won the last 2 games in San Siro, but they've always been close games with a few polemics as well, some dubious decisions. So, but this year, Napoli and Milan, they are really 2 worlds apart. Napoli have scored 20 more goals than Milan and conceded 20 less. Now, they play each other 3 times in the space of 16 days. Napoli could well win all the 3 games and advance to the semifinals of the Champions League and seal the title. The away form for Milan is disappointing, it's shocking. -3 goal difference, lost 4 of the last 5, only 1 clean sheet away in the last 7. And against Udinese, they really were played off the park in the first half. Udinese looked fitter, they're running behind, they created space in the midfield, they had always one man over on the wide side. As soon as Pioli started changing the formation and played with the likes of Ballo Touré, for example, in defense, they didn't look the same. So obviously, again, is a question, are they a little bit short? Is that team not? I mean, is he only a good starting 11, and as soon as Pioli starts making changes, they suffer? They're thinking, the media here in Italy are reporting that Pioli might go back to 4-3-3, so to his original system to play against Napoli, rather than playing with a back 3. So to have Calabria as a right back playing against Varascelia, probably Krunic in the middle alongside Tonali and Benasser, because they did suffer in the middle against Udinese. Good news for Milan is that Rafael Leao with Portugal has been showing some good signs, but again, his season has not been as good as last year. Napoli, well, last 8 wins in all competition have been win 2-0. They don't leave anything to the opposition. They beat them convincingly, and against Torino, yes, Torino had a couple of chances in the beginning, but then they just ruthless, relentless. They go for it. And I wonder if this game could be similar to the one we saw against Juventus earlier in the year. So if Napoli scores early, it could finish 4-5, 5-1, 4-1. So the only chance for Milan is really, if the game is still 0-0 after 35, 40 minutes, maybe Napoli could win it by 1 goal. It could be a little bit like the Lazio game. But, this Napoli side, we talked so well about them. They no longer have the fear of playing at home like they had last season when they squandered so many times. They look so composed, so assured, and I think they're going to be fired up. This is the game that really, virtually, is going to hand the Scudetto from the shirt of Milan to the shirt of Napoli. They need to prepare the scissors and and sew it, the Scudetto in the shirts. I mean, they're going to win, really. And they're going to win well. And I think I'm going to go for a nation handicap of -0.75 for Napoli, which pays 206. If they win by 1 goal margin, which is the least it should happen. At least you win half your stake, which is still decent considering it's 206 for the Asian handicap minus 75. As I said, if Napoli scores early in the first 10-15 minutes, you can go for an over 2.5 goals and Napoli win.
I remember we were saying before the game against Torino that perhaps that game, Napoli can switch off because they have the Champions League, because it's almost pointless, and then they won.
Torino deserved a goal in the first half. They hit the post and had a couple of chances. But, then Napoli can score against you from set pieces, can score against you from counter-attacks. They got so many options, really. So it is really difficult to imagine a game where they do not score. I mean, what Lazio did against them was a masterpiece tactically, but not every team can do that for 90 minutes.
I'm very curious also to see that Champions League fixture, because the difference between these two teams is huge. But, the Champions League is a different competition. Milan have so many trophies in their museum.
Yeah, it could be.
Perhaps it can be an addition, and we don't see this difference that we are seeing, of course, in the Serie A. But this is for you to tell me, Danny, in 10 days when we are going to watch that game in the Champions League. Still 2 more games on Monday, perhaps to put your money, perhaps not to watch them because there is nothing to play for. I think in Empoli, Lecce, far both from the relegation spots, 9 points Empoli, 8 points Lecce, and none of them are in great form. Actually, 4 consecutive defeats for Empoli, the same for Lecce.
Empoli, no wins since end of January, since they beat Inter, but they are plus 11 on Verona. So again, playing on Monday, 2 days after Verona, whatever happens in Turin.
No, 9 plus 9.
9 plus 9, right, you're right. I didn't do the math very well. But whatever happens in Turin is gonna obviously be so important for Empoli, which they don't really need to win this game. Lecce, perhaps a little bit more urgent for them to collect points because, yes, they come from the back of 4 defeats, all without scoring. That's the most worrying things for Lecce. Whereas for Empoli, they're without their star man, the keeper, Vicario, until mid-April. And that could be costly for them because Vicario has been outstanding. So Empoli would have conceded many more goals if it wasn't for him. Look, the reverse fixture finished 1-1. These two teams are in the bottom 2 for over 2.5 goals in their matches. So only 30% of Lecce's games and 33% of Empoli's game have been over 2.5 goals. I think they're going to be rather cautious with this one. Maybe Empoli have started hitting a bit of a raw patch as they did last season towards the end. First half draw, I think it seems to me the more secure bet here, 208.
And the last one is Sassuolo Torino. As I said at the beginning, Sassuolo, they are now in great form in the middle of the table, but beating every single team, 4 consecutive victories. The last one was against Spezia, whereas for Torino, Danny, it's true that they got thrashed by Napoli, but before also they were in good shape, in good form, beating Lecce or Bologna, for instance.
Yeah, because against Napoli was the first time they did not score in the last 4 games, and we mentioned before they had chance in the first half. They deserve at least a goal. Away from home, Torino this season have been okay, 18 points, 1 more than Inter, scoring 12 out of 14 away games. So despite not scoring many goals, Torino is one of the few teams in Serie A that never score more than 2 goals. They play some good stuff, and they do create chances. And when they travel, they are also propositive and aggressive. The question is whether who's going to score the goal for this one in this one, because Karamo and Miranchuk might be out. So yes, normally Torino's games are low-scoring games. Only 17 out of 27 have seen more than 1.5 goals. So, in 10 occasions have been less than 2 goals. And they play a Sassuolo side, which I think it is probably the side to watch at the moment, alongside Udinese, Bologna. Yes, as you mentioned, they play for nothing, but they still play attacking football, 4-3-3. They got interesting players, the likes of course, of Lorientè, who again have been a very good addition to Serie A this season. Won the last 4. 2 of those games have been high scoring. 2 of these have been low scoring. They only beat Spezia 1-0, which was a little bit surprising. But since the end of January, they've only lost to Napoli, beat, of course, Milan and Roma in the meanwhile, both to score here. I think it's going to be entertaining, and that pays 192.
All right. By the way, I was checking the stats that we have in Oddspedia about Serie A, Danny, and the two worst teams in the Serie A for over 2.5 goals are Empoli and Lecce.
And that's
and
what we
they are
said.
playing
Yeah.
before. So you mentioned draw at halftime. So it's very
Yeah.
likely that we saw a goalless draw, or we don't see.
Oh yeah, I mean, Oddspedia got so many stats these days, and yeah, I do check it regularly. You can say, and when there is such a match, when the bottom two teams for over 2.5 goals play each other, you need to. It might be an over 2.5 goals, but that first half draw or first half under 1 goal, I think that's really what makes sense here. But yeah, check the page, check Oddspedia. The stats there are amazing.
Indeed. So, Danny, let's finish the video with all your knowledge to put in place your best bet for this week.
Juventus to beat Verona that pays 150.
And your ACCA?
For selections, Inter Fiorentina over 1.5 goals, Spezia Salernitana double chance x2, Monza Lazio over 1.5 goals, and Empoli Lecce under 3.5 goals. Total odds altogether 396.
Grazie, Danny. Thanks everyone for watching us. Remember, of course, press the like and subscribe, and see you very soon. Ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.